I have always just, I guess, wanted to succeed in whatever I've done. Had a healthy level of delusion that, yeah, I could do it. And I just never really doubted myself. And I know not everybody has that. And I speak to a lot of other business owners who are, I guess, they have their moments of indecision and worry and fear. And skydiving definitely has helped a lot of that journey. Um, Obviously, I was taking risks prior to that, but it really does teach you about yourself. It's not about adrenaline anymore. It's about conquering fears and pushing through it because everything is scary. It's just you can't get rid of it. And fear and excitement physiologically feel the exact same in the body. And it's just appreciating, okay, yes, this is scary.
Welcome to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, the leading weekly show for Australians who want to learn how to unlock their full self, health and wealth potential. I'm your host, Bushy Martin, and each week I go deep with the best investors, experts, leaders and founders to find out what it takes to break free from the grind, discover freedom and to live by design. Subscribe now and join me and get invested in the life that you really want. Let's get started. Hi, freedom fighters. When was the last time that you took a risk? What holds you back from achieving your goals and realising your dreams? What are you afraid of? Are you so comfortable with your average life of good that you're too scared to go for great? What if everything that your heart desires is waiting for you just on the other side of doing what scares you most? Where tackling your biggest obstacle is both the way and the key. So if you have to step up to the plate and take your fear by the horns and just push through and do it anyway, will you still be able to control your emotions and keep your thinking straight, or will you panic and allow your fear to continue to control you and hold you back as you try to convince yourself to settle for a life of pale mediocrity and regret? Just ask yourself, what if? Come on, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's by feeling the fear and doing it anyway. To make this more real, because I don't know about you, but I've got a inbuilt fear of heights, I want you to imagine this. You sign up for skydiving, where you're going to jump out of a small, flimsy aeroplane from 3 kilometres up in the air or about 2,000 feet above the ground, and then free fall at breakneck speed for 45 seconds at about 195 kilometres an hour until and if your parachute opens. So you do a few hours of training to learn how to jump out of the plane, how to steer your parachute, and how to land safely. Then it's time to strap on your parachute and board the plane with the instructor, along with the other thrill seekers. Are you still with me? Are you terrified yet? Can you do it? Well, as the plane takes off, you're just sitting there as your breath shortens and your blood pressure and your pulse start rising as the plane keeps going up and up, and your heart starts thumping through your chest and pounding in your ears. The first and second jumper take the leap, and now it's your turn. You're now numb with fear as you put your leg out the door over the edge and the wind grabs you and almost tears you away. Then you grab the wing strut and stand on the wheel and look down terrifyingly to the earth that's way below you as the instructor gives you the go signal, and next thing you know, your feet are kicked backwards as you push away from the wing with your hands, your heart in your mouth, as you can barely breathe. And in the adrenaline rush, you forget to count the seconds as you hold your hands and legs out wide, and then you just fall like a bullet at terrifying speed. Your eyes are open, but you can't see. Your ears are working, but you just can't hear anything except for the mad rush of the wind. All you can feel is the endless falling and the rapid thumping of your heart. Time seems to slow and take forever as you continue to rocket towards the earth, and your life flashes before you and you fear for your life when suddenly and miraculously you're yanked to a screeching halt as your beautiful round parachute opens above you, and you breathe a massive sigh of relief as you woohoo excitedly at the top of your lungs while you float in wonder and spine-tingling exhilaration slowly back to earth. What a challenge and what a hoot. Would you do it? would you have the courage to take the risk of jumping out of a perfectly good plane and just feeling the fear and doing it anyway? How risky is it really? As author Mark Twain was famous for saying, courage is resistance to fear and mastery of fear, not the absence of fear. And he went on to say that I've had a lot of worries in my life, most of which never happened. Because the reality is that you're more likely to get run over by a car walking across the street than you are to lose your life jumping out of a plane, with roughly one fatality for every 400,000 skydives, compared to a death every 5,900 odd car accidents based on American skydiving records, which means that you're 67 times more likely to die crossing the road than you are if you skydive. So, like most things in life, the perceived fear and risk is much greater than the actual reality. It just feels a lot scarier. And this is similar, but on a smaller scale, to the perceived challenge and fear that faces a lot of first-time property investors. You're having to spend a lot of money now to take the risk on the future uncertain prospect of something you don't know a lot about and don't have much control over. Yet time and again, the hundreds of thousands of hard-working Aussies who have the courage to master their fears and take the leap into the unknown of property have then lasted the distance and reaped the financial rewards. US President Franklin D. Roosevelt once said that the only real fear is that of fear itself. And what is really interesting here is something that I only recently learned, and that is that fear is a learned response. Fear is a learned response. Sonia and I were recently out on our morning walk along the shore of the lake, and we saw a fledgling bird that had just flown the nest for the first time, and it was stuck in the water and couldn't fly because its wings were waterlogged. So I quickly jumped into the lake, just like many have been telling me to do so for years, and I slowly and quietly waded up to the bird as she just kept looking at me totally unflustered. And then I just scooped her up and gently held her so that I could take her to the safety of the shore. I just couldn't believe that the bird just allowed me to do that without kicking up any fuss, until we talked to the local wildlife rescuer who let us know that we're born without fear. And the bird was so young that it hadn't learned fear yet. Now, let me say that again. It hadn't learned fear. Now, this has been a big revelational penny drop moment for me, because I now realise that our fears are a learned and conditioned response. We aren't born with fear. We learn it from those around us. Now, our young, fearless kids remind us all of this. So here's the kicker. If fear is learned, then it can also be unlearned. So what about you? Are your unwarranted and unfounded fears holding you back from the financial freedom and ideal lifestyle that you so desire? Well, it's time to face your fears and have the courage to feel them, unlearn them, and just do what's holding you back anyway, because most of what we fear never eventuates. And if you're watching or listening and you'd like to explore further how you can free up your time and create an income for life by investing in property properly, by getting some much-needed clarity and comfort to allay any of your fears, whether you're new to the game or an experienced investor or property player, feel free to explore your why, what and how of successful property that unpacks my 4 decades of property and life experience by tapping into our recent released Freedom Formula program. There you can enjoy anytime, anywhere at your leisure by clicking the link in the show notes now, where the first module is totally free. Now, someone who knows all about everything that I've just been discussing, as you're about to hear, is today's special guest, Skye Taylor. But not only is Skye a very accomplished skydiver, which you'll unpack for us shortly, but she's also a 20-year property veteran who's gone from buyer's agent to sales agent to dedicated independent property manager in her boutique tailored property management business. And I love that name in good old Adelaide. So welcome, and let's get invested, Skye.
Thanks for having me, Bushy. That was an incredible introduction. I was nodding along the whole way going, yep, absolutely. Love it.
Well, I know you've done a lot of jumps, having sort of some of the information you've shared and doing a bit of Google stalking. So, and I'll be honest, scare diving scares the living crap out of me.
Skydiving. I haven't heard of that before. But everyone does say, why would you jump out of a perfectly good aeroplane? And you have to see the planes to understand they're not good. You want to jump out of them. They're not the sort of plane you're imagining that, we fly on our holidays on.
I could well imagine. Yes, they're there for the purpose, and that's to get you out of the plane and into the sky, I would imagine. But
Absolutely. Literally held together with duct tape sometimes. So we want to get in and get out. And then we've also got the control to land.
Absolutely love it. But already that tells me a lot about the courage that you personally have in yourself to be able to take that leap, because there's a lot of people, but we'll talk about it, and it sounds good until I actually have to strap the parachute on. That separates the sheep from the goats, I think. But hey, I'm probably getting ahead of myself a bit here, Skye, but for those who haven't had a chance to catch up with you or know much about you in the past, can you sort of kick things off for us by giving us a bit of rundown on what you do differently, and more importantly, why do you do what you do now, Skye?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I started my business, Tailored Property Management, here based out of Glenelg in South Australia. After hearing, I guess, repeated concerns from landlords, and just we all have the horror stories, we've all heard them. And I was just seeing that out there that the current model has its challenges, and I really wanted to provide a different service and educate property investors into why property investing is so great. So that's definitely why I do what I do, and I love it. I love the relationships that I build with my clients over the long term. Like, it's fantastic. It doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, look, what I'd like to do now is sort of circle back as far as you'd like to go, and sort of share with us what you've invested your time, energy, money in over the years. And it's not just about property, but tell us why you've done what you've done, and how has this then led you to where you are and what you're doing today?
Yeah, look, that's a great question, because I don't know how I first came across it, because I think I would have been 18. Obviously disillusioned with the idea of having a job, and I think we've all read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I was like, there's got to be a better way. So I kind of went deep down into, all the books that were available at the time. This was, the internet was still just coming on board. And I think there was probably 30 or 40 books that I read. I would go to courses. I wanted to learn everything about how to create passive income, how to be wealthy so that we weren't working for 50 years. I think I was 19 when I bought my first property, and it was just a little unit in the suburb that I lived in, cream brick, brown tile, typical 1960s unit, and rented it out and had no idea what I was doing, even though I'd read all of these courses and been to, speaking to investors who had done very well. And I tried to educate myself and still made all of the mistakes.
Well, you're not lonely. I've been right there with you, and I think our biggest learnings come from those mistakes, because it really fast tracks our track towards what we really want to be doing. And I think without mistakes, then people do it more by luck than by good management. But tell us, I'd like to sort of outside of the property arena for a second, because I'll come back to property in a second. How has your upbringing affected your core values and beliefs and what's important to you, and how has that then influenced who you are and what you've become, Skye?
It's a really good question. I think for the longest time, it was always sort of bred into me that, owning real estate is security, and that's really important. My family wasn't wealthy. They weren't poor, but, and I never went without, but it was definitely, money was a touchy topic in my household. And it wasn't something that my parents ever spoke to me about either. It was just this constant feeling of we don't have enough. So that certainly shaped, I guess, how I view finances and property today.
Yeah.
I've had to work through that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. As I mentioned in my intro, you went from uh, buyer's agent to selling agent to then into property management. And quite often it's the reverse. Uh,
Mm.
Talk to us about what led you down that path and why you made those changes and transitions.
Yeah, you're right. It generally is the reverse. It's very rare that someone starts in sales and then goes to property management. Um, I became a buyer's agent again through the connections and all the work that I was doing, trying to deep dive into property investing. Um, I can't even remember the company that I worked for, but it was remote at the time. They were based in Melbourne.
Yep.
And it was still on to me to find the clients, but then they would support me through that when we did have a client. And back in those days, it was honestly just putting offers in on a volume of properties and eventually one would accept. Like that's not the market we're in at the moment, but we would create equity just by being really aggressive with our offers. Um, but the thing is, like, I mean, this is nearly 20 years ago, and buyer's agents as a service was really not common.
Very rare.
Yeah. And so trying to convince people to not only pay you money to do so, it was a bit of a challenge. So I guess pivoted into real estate sales. And I really enjoyed it. And I still do the odd sale here and there now. Like there's a lot that I like about it, but I was very young and it was a way of life. Like real estate sales is not something you can do 40 hours a week. It was 7 days a week, very long hours. I was very young.
Yeah.
And so I guess the genius in me went, well, I'd like to start my own business. And sales as a sales business on its own, you're still only the one person. There's a limited scale opportunity. It's also not very valuable as a business. So I chose to pivot into property management. And at that time, very little experience. There was a lot of delusion involved. I was 25. And yeah, somehow we made it work. But that's kind of the journey through the career. And then again, there's a lot of regret involved in when I sold my business. So a few years into it, I built a reasonable portfolio. I had no business knowledge. I'd learnt everything the hard way. I had really no support network or anyone around me to support me at that time. And so when things became very difficult, I chose to exit out of it, as opposed to if I had someone in my corner saying, hey, why don't you just take a holiday? Why don't you do this? Like I didn't have that and I was very young. And I went, this is just not for me anymore. I just wish I hadn't done that. I wish I'd stuck it out that whole time. But we live and we learn. And so then I went into student accommodation after that in the more corporate management role, which is very similar to property management, just at a higher volume.
Yep.
And that's where I was able to learn a lot of the business skills that I was lacking that first time round. So I've now combined all of that, all of the lessons that I've learned, and reopened the business again.
Yeah, I love it. And it's been going for a good 2 or 3 years now, I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been great. It's been way better than the first time round, because I've got not only the knowledge now, but just the general confidence around it.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I mean, it might have felt, you might look back at that with some regret, but the learnings that you picked up on the journey wouldn't put you in the position you are now if you hadn't done that. So I often say,
Absolutely.
touched on already that, it's our challenges and mistakes that give us the best learnings in life and really fast track where we're heading. So I love that. I guess the other thing that I'd be, I guess, keen to explore a little bit, Skye, is that what I'm hearing already, in conjunction with your obvious ability to jump out of a plane, you're not scared to have a go at things, and so there's a level of self-belief and courage that's clearly inherent in you, because not many at your then tender age would have even contemplated starting their own business. But where is that? What's driven that? What's that where you don't know but you're going to have a go? Where's that come from? Is that something you built, something you learned from your folks? Talk to me a bit about that.
Definitely not something I learned from my parents. They're not that way inclined at all. Perhaps some stubbornness. I feel like it is definitely personality driven. I'm not sure. I've never thought about that before, but I have always just, I guess, wanted to succeed in whatever I've done. Had a healthy level of delusion that, yeah, I could do it. And I just never really doubted myself. And I know not everybody has that. And I speak to a lot of other business owners who are, I guess, they have their moments of indecision and worry and fear. And skydiving definitely has helped a lot of that journey. Obviously, I was taking risks prior to that, but it really does teach you about yourself. It's not about adrenaline anymore. It's about conquering fears and pushing through it, because everything is scary. It's just, you can't get rid of it. And fear and excitement physiologically feel the exact same in the body. And it's just appreciating, okay, yes, this is scary. And relaunching the business the second time was scary. My circumstances were very different the second time round than they were the first time.
Yeah.
But I guess I live my life by failing fast method, that I'm just going to make the decision. If it's not right, then we pivot, we change. There's always a solution to everything.
No, I love it. I think having the courage and the gumption to jump out of a plane, any perceived fear would seem small in comparison to that for most people, I think. And it's like, well, as I said in the introduction, how hard can it be? What have I got to lose? I just think a lot of Australians have become so comfortable and secure in what we've got that they don't want to take that risk and then live a pretty vanilla life as a result of that. So full respect for the courage that you show in that regard. Something that I'd also like to dive into a little bit, but before I do that, I kept using that dive word, and it's pretty appropriate given the skydiving exercise. I understand from what you shared with me, you've actually been in a world record breaking attempt in skydiving. Can you tell us, share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was definitely my favorite skydiving memory ever. So you had to be selected to actually go into the camp, and there were a number of things that were requirements, and essentially you had to be approved by your chief instructor at your drop zone. You had to have a certain level of jumps, a certain amount of time in the sport. So it wasn't just that anyone could try. And then we go to the States to participate in a camp for a number of weeks before we attempt the record. And the record itself took 7 planes to get roughly 130 people in the air at the same time. And we all need to, I guess, dock or grab grips. I'm not sure how best to explain that, but we all need to be connected at the same time. And that was probably, I think, 30 to 40 attempts, a little while ago now, before we get that. And the thing with skydiving is that you're obviously rushing through the air. It's very loud. But when we all docked, it's like the air just got quiet. It was the weirdest experience, but also equally amazing. And that part was actually the easy bit. But then when you've got 130 canopies and parachutes in the air, super dangerous. Like, that's the part where the fatalities can happen. So you're just constantly swiveling your head, looking for the other parachutes, making sure you're not in anyone's flight path. That was scary every single time. And we made it land safely and no one crashed into each other. We're just, yeah, we'll go do that again. And it was just, yeah, an incredible experience that I'm very grateful to have had.
Amazing. So 30 or 40 attempts before you actually crack the world record.
Yeah. So on a lot of those are what we call practice jumps, where we might have started with, say, 60 people, and then we build up to then the different formations. Yeah. But yeah, it was a pretty special experience that you couldn't have done if you didn't keep pushing through that fear, to be honest.
Absolutely amazing. I'm in awe of that. I reckon there'll be an absolute buzz. And I hadn't thought about it until you mentioned it. But normally once the chute goes up, okay, well, I'm safe now. But in this case, with so many in it, almost like jellyfish in a jar, all sort of floating around each other, that would have been so that the fun didn't end
Well,
when the parachute opened.
no, we've got limited airspace in which to have this many people and this many canopies flying. And the risk is that something can happen called gift wrapping, which is really gross to think about. But if you were to land into someone else's canopy, that would then wrap up around you, and then you're very limited with what you can do at that point. And it's just, it gives me heebie-jeebies even just now talking about it.
So here's us standing up on the back of the deck right now.
Horrible way. Yeah. It's so that's to me why that was the riskiest part, because that's just not a good time.
Well, I can see why everything else is easy for you after
Yes.
that, and full respect, full admiration. I want to jump to the other side now and sort of get you to share what you think's been your most challenging event in your life, and what learnings and changes have resulted from that.
Great question. I would say, and I'm probably not alone in this, the greatest challenge would be getting divorced. It's challenging for a number of reasons. No one goes into marriage expecting that's where you'll end up. And the statistics aren't good. There's 50% of us who've done that. But the lessons that I've learned from that have been pretty incredible on both a personal level and the learnings that I've done, my inner work to work through all of that following the divorce, the financial lessons that I learned, and I continue to learn them, to be honest.
Yeah. Share some of those, because there's a lot of us that have either been through it or sadly will go through it. Do you mind sharing some of the learnings, both at whatever level, that might help some of those that are listening in today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably the biggest learning for me, and I'll be fully transparent here, I've been married twice. The first marriage was very short, very long-lived. I was very young, and we didn't have children. So we're still friends to this day. It was very simple. Once you have children, it absolutely complicates everything. So my second husband, we did have twins together, and yeah, it definitely throws up a lot of challenges because of that, I think. But yeah, and I think given that it was my second marriage, I came to the marriage with an investment property.
Yep.
And so I then purchased another property while in that marriage. And unfortunately, I had to sell both of those assets as a result of the separation. And that was very, very difficult when I had sacrificed to not only hang on to the investment property, but sacrificed to get the second property. And yeah, net gain was not great.
Yeah, that sort of exercise can put you back years because you basically at ground zero. And I know because I've been there, and that was probably the most challenging time in my life, to be honest. Not only financially, but I spent 2 years in counselling, getting my head sorted out, because I didn't want to end up making the same mistakes again. Because the issue is you take yourself with you, and if you're not aware of who you are and what you're doing to contribute to those situations, then you're going to find yourself back there. And I guess the real challenge, John, you've had twins. I had a son. The relationship ends, but the contact doesn't, because you're still on a very regular basis, depending on the age of your children, having to have contact with that. And that not only creates issues for both of you, but also your children, because they get often in the middle of that, and wear the scars as a consequence of it. So not an easy time. what, if anything, do you still struggle with, Skye?
Ooh. Um, Probably still to a degree recovering from the ground zero effect, I think. Um, I have been able to purchase another property since then. I've been divorced for 5 years, and it was a very difficult journey to repurchase property again. But still, and this is probably not right, but I'm looking around at my friends and family who are similar age and seeing where they're at, and I'm at ground zero, and it's, we shouldn't compare our journey, but it can be very challenging at times. And I know that's not going to be my story forever, but certainly it's a little frustrating that that's the way that things panned out.
Yeah, I guess the comfort there, because having lived through the same situation, I constantly said to myself, it's not where I'm at, it's where I'm heading. That's important.
Oh, I love that.
And
Thank you.
yeah, comparison is the killer of motivation. So I just avoided it really and said, okay, well, I know where I'm going. I know where I'm going to be. I just kept focusing on the end goal and trying to turn down my feelings, because you do have those feelings like, oh, how do I end up here? Look at them, they've got it easy. It's not an easy road, but with that focus and the skills that you bring to the table and the experience that you've had and your ability to take calculated risks, there's only one way that's going to hit, Skye. I have absolutely no doubt about that. So, and I guess 20 years on, or more than that now, nearly 25 years on, I've lived to tell the tale, and continue to focusing on the right stuff, which you're doing, does pay dividends, and you enjoy it a whole lot more because you really had to fight for it. So
Absolutely.
I'm showing you a bit of grey hair on that comment, but that's okay. Now let's jump back into your property story a little bit and sort of unpack it a little bit more, because something I'd love for you to talk to us about is why property in the first place. And did you have any initial fears and feelings of concern about property before you decided to get in? Can you take yourself back to that point?
Yeah, good question. I was working in real estate at the time. And so I think because real estate's a tangible asset, like we all love the idea of that and the renovation, and it's something you can play with in theory as opposed to shares. I still invest in shares. I don't have an issue with shares, but property will forever be the first love.
Yeah.
I don't recall having any fears around investing in property, but I think it's more you don't know what you don't know. So I didn't know what questions I wasn't asking the right questions in the first place. And I speak to a lot of landlords now that they've gone, yep, we're going to buy an investment property, and I'll speak to them about their journey, what they're wanting to achieve, and they just don't know the answers or what they should be asking. So perhaps if they did, they might feel more fears perhaps, but I think everyone just assumes it's quite simple. You buy the property, put a tenant in, and happy days in 10 years' time. Yeah. And there's probably a lot more that goes into it. And I think also being very young when I bought it probably led to not having any fears.
Yeah, good point. There's a bit of a two-edged sword, I think, because I often say that if I knew what I knew now then, there's a lot of stuff I wouldn't have done, because I would have realised how challenging it is. And I think in that sense, the ignorance is a helping factor. And as long as you're able to pivot and transition on the ground and learn from what's happening as you go, then having too much knowledge is almost another barrier. Because I'm like myself, my wife and I, we started a property management business. I knew nothing about property management. Sonia ended up driving it, and we just learned on the ground. Because we had zero involvement in property up until that point. We just thought we could do it better. But I think the good thing about that is that when you've got that mindset, you're really determined to make it happen, and you'll go the extra mile to understand things that the people who've either just fallen into it or been handed to on a plate just don't take the time or energy. So the level of care that you bring to the table, I think, is much higher as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point, that if you're having to work hard for something as opposed to, falling into it, you certainly approach it in a different way.
Just on the investment topic again, and not particularly about property, because we all invest our time, energy, and money, and passions and other things. If you look back on your life so far, Skye, what has been your best and worst investment today, from both sides, and what have you learned from both of those?
Definitely the best investment is around knowledge. I guess if I find a topic that I'm wanting to learn about, I will go deep into it. And I have always and I don't know where this comes from, and I'd love to know because I would like to impart it onto my children. But I've just always had an attitude of constant improvement and that 1% better. So I've always just wanted to improve on anything, whether it's property or whether it's my own mindset, whatever that may be. I enjoy challenging myself and just being better. So knowledge has been a huge part of my life. And I've obviously always invested in courses and learned from people who know more than I do. The worst investment, I think, has to be my first property. It just has to be. I don't think I've ever invested in anything else that I would classify as a worst investment. And even then, the lessons that I learned from it, I don't have regrets around that.
Why was it? Why do you consider it to be your worst? Was it the property itself, the location, or what was it? And what have you learned from that?
All of the above. So I bought in the suburb that I lived in. Even though I was at the time sort of buying properties for other people from me to sell, I don't know why I needed to be in the same suburb as where I lived, but anyway, that was what I did. I overpaid for the property, didn't even negotiate. I don't know why. Got emotional about it. I just wanted that property, and it was nothing special about that property. I didn't have any real strategic plans around how I was going to make money from it. Almost a bit of an ego thing, perhaps, to say I had an investment property.
Yep.
Because it definitely wasn't financially amazing. So the lessons I learnt were definitely to do my research in suburbs and make sure there's a plan as to how we're going to make money from that investment. I definitely would be probably less emotional about an investment property purchase again in the future. And I think I have a different opinion on overpaying in property now. I think, while we don't want to be silly with it, I think the real estate market is a lot more forgiving if you are in it long enough.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a learning, but yeah, I definitely feel like I bought in the worst suburb for an investment. Because I think, 14 years later, the growth was appalling.
I've got a feeling it's going to be north of the city, but I'll be right. Of good old Adelaide.
No, I feel like I probably would have performed better if it was north of the city. I bought in a little coastal town called Victor Harbour.
Oh, God's Waiting Lounge.
Yes. And it was literally, that's what was happening. I was waiting for the real estate market to increase, and it never did. Until I sold it, and then it increased.
That always happens, by the way. It's a beautiful place to live, but only old people live there. So that becomes its own inhibitor, sadly, but a beautiful part of the world. I love Victor Harbour.
Beautiful to visit. Yeah, not sure it's a great place to live if you're under the age of 65.
The Great Departure Lounge. Yes, no, well said. Well, tell me, given all of that and everything you picked up along the way professionally as well, what's your ongoing property investment strategy. Can you sort of talk to, and how is that going to help you to achieve your ideal lifestyle?
That is a good question. And I've got friends in my life who probably don't even know the answer to this, but I actually want to rent vest in the coming year.
Yep.
So I own my property at the moment that I actually was lucky enough to live with family to save for the deposit because I was starting from ground zero.
Yep.
So we got into that in a very challenging market where prices were continuing to increase at the same time the interest rates were increasing month on month. So it just took a lot longer to get here than what I had preferred. But my children are getting bigger and I was looking and weighing up what that looks like for me as a single person to purchase a bigger house in the area that I want to live. And that can be quite limiting because I do live in an expensive suburb because I like the lifestyle here. So exploring rent vesting, I feel is good for my situation in that I can still be in the business of owning real estate as an asset, and I will continue to take my money to invest in perhaps smaller assets that are more appropriate for the one income.
Yep.
But this way we can also still enjoy our lifestyle. And so that's the plan for this year so that I can then purchase a property that I would like to actually put my mother into to help her.
Yeah, awesome.
So that will then look like an investment property as well. So for the tax benefits, which will be beneficial from a business perspective. So I'll continue to buy investments as I can.
Yeah, no, well, what you've just described is exactly what Sonia and I did when we got together. We fell into a mistake. It wasn't even called investing then. It's just an accountant sort of posed the question, would you rather the tax office lieutenant covering 90% of the cost of a property or all of it coming out of your own pocket? And at that time when I didn't have much, it was like, okay, that makes perfect sense to me. So we end up living where we wanted to live at a fraction of the cost of a mortgage and then buying assets in areas that we could afford and then the time letting the tax man do the heavy lifting. So I think it's an approach that gets talked about a lot more now, but there aren't still not a lot that are taking advantage of it. Again, because of the ego stuff that's attached to property in Australia, a lot of people find it difficult to say that they are renting. For us, we love the flexibility of renting because it meant we could change places, locations, properties when if it felt like it did cost a fraction. We lived in some great locations as a consequence, while the properties in some isolated and distant areas were doing their thing. So I think it's an awesome approach. I'm now going to jump into what I affectionately refer to as the ambush round or the bushfire lightning round, Skye, where I ask 4 quick questions that the listeners always want to gain your words of wisdom on. And the first of those is, if you could have a coffee with anyone, be they dead or alive or an historical figure, who would you choose and why?
I have recently discovered the Huberman Lab podcast. So Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist in America, and I am obsessed with his information and how he shares it. I think I came across him as part of a health and fitness journey, but he does all sorts of topics and they can be 2 to 3 hours long. So you can't really listen to them all in one. But I heard him say on one of the podcasts, he spends months researching said topic before he releases a podcast. It's a very, very smart man. I would love to have a coffee with him.
Yeah, 100% agree. And you can tell that the level of detail that goes into his podcast and the conversations he has with his guests, there's a lot of gold that goes right across health, wealth, the whole gamut, actually. So, I'm right with you there. I'd love to share a copy with him as well.
Come along as well.
I would absolutely be there. So, jumping into a different topic for a second, what's both the worst and the best piece of property advice that you've ever received?
Um, Probably the worst was the other real estate agents that I was friendly with at the time not giving me any guidance or support when I bought my first property. They were like, yeah, just buy it, it'll be fine. Um, so probably the lack of advice would be the worst advice I ever received.
Yeah.
Certainly having people in your corner is really valuable.
Yeah.
And then the best piece of advice, and it's a common one, but it's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market. And I live and breathe by that.
100%. It just gets easier if your horizon's long enough. You can actually embrace time as your friend, not treat it as your enemy. And there's so many Australians who are in a gut-busting hurry to make it happen yesterday. They put themselves in much riskier positions as a consequence. Whereas if you just go, okay, I'm going to make good decisions, then get the hell out of the way and let time do its work, you can get on with enjoying life and putting your time into friends, family, and your career, while the property just ticks along quietly, looking after itself and funding your future wealth. So, bit of a no-brainer for me. Love that one. Different subject again. What superpower do you wish you had and why?
I feel like you might know the answer to this one, Bushy, but it would be to fly, without a doubt. I have, I guess, become as close to flying as I can, and it is literally the best fun you can have. Very liberating, and yeah, I would love to be able to fly whenever I want.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I mean, as you said, you couldn't get much closer with what you've done so far. But yeah, that I often, I was only saying to Sonia on the cruise, because watching gulls and everything flying around the cruise ship. And I was like, oh, I wish I could do that. I just wish, just a freak. Just unbelievable. But perhaps I'll come back in the next life in that form.
As a bird, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, to finish these off, what's a sort of personal happy habit, a rewarding ritual, or a daily discipline that you employ that you think's contributed most to your achievement and success today?
I don't know if this is a cop out, but I definitely think exercise. It's been a huge part of my life, whether that's running or weight training or whatever that might look like. But the discipline to continue to show up tends to breed into every other aspect of my life. I will then choose to fuel my body well. I then have energy to do what I do, play with my children. Like, it just has a huge impact on my whole life. So that's definitely a habit that I will not go without.
Yeah, I love it. Again, something I also share because it sharpens every aspect of your life, and there's actually inbuilt discipline because it then cascades into what you eat, how you sleep. The benefits are endless, but most importantly, it actually develops the habits that you need to apply to things like property, because it's that regular, consistent, persistent, and patient approach that produces the most fruit. And it also sort of builds in, like, we all know you don't go to the gym once and then end up looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You've got to do it for years and gradually, incrementally build up strength and flexibility and everything and time that goes with it. Well, once that mindset's there because you're doing it, that then ends up rolling out into most other aspects of your life. So, so I love that one. Look, I could talk for hours. We're only really just scratched the surface, but I just wanted to sort of take the time now to thank you for sharing the ins and outs of your very inspiring personal journey so far, Skye. Before we close, if our conversation has raised any issues that anyone listening would like to confidentially delve deeper into in regard to your specific property needs or challenges, feel free to book in with me for a personal solution session by clicking the link in the show notes, where you'll have my complete, dedicated and undivided attention to take advantage of my 40-odd years worth of property experience to help you solve your property challenges for a full 60 minutes. We now look forward to continuing our conversation with Skye in next week's episode, where we're going to unpack the ins and outs of your property future through the pivotal eyes of all things property management. So remember to always get invested in your knowledge and your network, and we look forward to getting invested with you again then, Skye.
Thanks, Bushy.
Thanks for tuning in to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, your home for property investment insights and inspiration. Make sure you subscribe to Property Hub for free. Get your weekly dose of Get Invested inspiration along with every episode of Realty Talk, Australia's top online property show for red-hot property investing news and insights direct from industry leaders and influencers. And finally, I'll see you next time.